The Florida sun beat down on the driveway as I clutched the letter in my trembling hands, a legal notice, cold and clinical, sent by my own son. I had to read it twice to believe it. "You're no longer authorized to enter the property." My property. The house I paid off, the house I gave him out of love. The silence in my kitchen was thick. Only the refrigerator hummed, indifferent to the chaos unraveling inside me. I hadn't heard from my son Adam in over 3 weeks. Not a call, not a message, and now this. I dialed his number with a shaky thumb. Straight to voicemail. When I finally reached him after days of unanswered calls, his voice was hard, distant. "You did what you had to do as a mother," he said, "but I don't owe you anything." I dropped the phone for a moment. I couldn't move. My own child, the boy I raised on my own after his father passed, the boy I worked double shifts to feed, was now treating me like an obligation or worse, a burden. What hurt the most wasn't the words themselves, it was what they meant. That's when I remembered the drawer, the one in my bedroom, top left. Inside, folded neatly in an envelope, was the will I had drafted just a few months earlier. I had named Adam the sole heir. He would have inherited everything, the house, the savings, my antique ring from Nana Rosa, all of it. But as I held the envelope in my hands that night, something shifted. Because what started as a mother's final gesture of love turned into something far more disturbing. I wasn't just betrayed, I was erased. And I knew then it was time to rewrite everything. But before I continue, just a quick note, I realized something surprising the other day. Over 98% of people who watch these stories aren't subscribed. If you're one of them, thank you for being here. And if you're enjoying this, I'd be so grateful if you hit that subscribe button. It's free, and it helps me keep sharing real stories that matter. Anyway, back to what happened next. Before everything changed, I used to believe that love, especially a mother's love, was more than enough. My name is Margaret Hill, but most people in my little neighborhood outside Tampa just call me Maggie. I'm 67, a retired school librarian, and I've always believed in kindness, books, and banana bread, in that order. My life was never flashy, but it was mine. I raised my son Adam alone after my husband Michael passed away from cancer when Adam was just 6 years old. Those early years were tough. I remember cutting coupons just to afford his school shoes and pretending I wasn't hungry so he'd have enough to eat. But I never complained because I had him. Adam was my reason for everything. He was a sweet, curious child, always asking questions about the stars or the Civil War or why dogs tilt their heads when we talk. I poured every ounce of love into him, every bedtime story, every homemade birthday cake, every scraped knee. I was there. After he graduated college, the first in our family to do so, he got a great job in finance and eventually moved into a new home. Kayla, I was proud, so proud. But as the years passed, things changed. Calls became less frequent, visits turned into rushed dinners, and eventually even holidays felt formal. Still, I didn't want to believe the growing distance between us meant anything deeper. I told myself he was busy, that he'd come around. After all, I had just retired. I thought it was finally time for me to live a little, read on the porch, take a trip to St. Augustine, maybe join that watercolor class I'd been putting off for 10 years. But life had other plans. Just 2 months into retirement, I slipped on a wet floor at the grocery store. A fractured hip and a long recovery later, I found myself barely able to walk without assistance. The house, once my sanctuary, now felt like a prison. Stairs became mountains, groceries became puzzles. When Adam and Kayla offered to let me move into their guest house, a charming little 2-bedroom suite they had built above their garage, I was hesitant but deeply grateful. "I'll be out of your way," I said. "Just a roof and some quiet." "It's your home too, Mom," Adam replied. "We want you close." At first, it felt like a blessing. I made myself useful, cooked when I could, and helped Kayla with their 2 kids, my precious grandbabies, Max and Chloe. Their giggles filled my mornings with light. But over time, little cracks started to show. I noticed how Kayla would sigh when I stepped into the main house unannounced, even if it was just to bring over a pie. Adam started texting instead of stopping by in person, and I overheard conversations I was never meant to hear. She treats this place like it's hers. I just wish she'd give us space. I pretended not to notice. I kept smiling, baking, and offering help they rarely accepted because deep down, I still believed I was loved, still believed I was family. But the warmth faded, and soon the walls between us became real. One day, Adam came to me with paperwork. "It's just for legal purposes," he said, "in case anything happens, you know." It was a transfer of property rights, my old home, the one I'd signed over to him years ago when I moved in. He wanted it cleaned up, as he called it, so there would be no disputes down the road. I signed it without question. He was my son. "I trust you," I said. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Not long after, I noticed things changing in the guest suite. My TV service was suddenly disconnected, my pantry was missing items, and my thermostat, once comfortable, was now locked by an app one couldn't access. It wasn't until the legal letter arrived, barring me from the property entirely, that the mask fell away completely. That's when I remembered the will, and the love that once felt unbreakable now felt like leverage. But before I tell you what happened next, how I rewrote everything, let me tell you who I became in that moment. Because sometimes it takes heartbreak to wake up the fire inside you. At first, I told myself I was just being sensitive, that maybe Kayla was just stressed or Adam was overwhelmed with work. But over time, the small things, the little inconsistencies, started adding up like shadows that flickered just out of sight. They crept in slowly, silently, until I could no longer ignore them. It started with the thermostat. One evening, I walked into my living room and noticed it was much colder than usual. My bones had started aching more in the cold, especially since the hip fracture. When I reached for the thermostat to bump it up a few degrees, it blinked red, locked by admin. I didn't even know it could do that. I asked Adam about it the next day. "Oh," he said, not even looking up from his phone, "we had to lock it for the kids. They keep messing with it." "But the kids don't come up here," I said softly. He shrugged. "Just easier this way." That was the first real flicker in my gut, that quiet twisting feeling that something wasn't quite right. A few days later, I went to bring over banana bread, still warm from the oven, and I noticed the back door, which usually led to their kitchen, was locked. Not just the handle, deadbolt from the inside. I knocked and waited. Kayla opened it eventually. Her smile was tight, barely touching her eyes. "Oh, sorry," she said quickly, stepping aside like she was guarding something. "We were just cleaning up." The place is a mess. Behind her, the kitchen was spotless, not a dish out of place. The garbage was already out. The smell of expensive perfume hung in the air like a wall. I handed her the bread. "Thought you'd want some while it's still warm." "Oh," she said, hesitating. "That's sweet, thanks." She didn't invite me in. I walked back to the guest suite with a strange heaviness in my chest, the kind that doesn't come from sadness, but from doubt. The next clue came during a Sunday dinner. Adam had grilled outside and invited me over with the kids. For a moment, it felt like old times, laughter, food, a flicker of warmth I hadn't felt in months. But when I went to help clear the plates, I overheard them talking in the hallway. "I just don't want her here forever," Kayla said in a hushed voice. "She's family," Adam whispered back. "She's your family, and I'm telling you, I don't want her dying in that guest house." My hands froze on the tray. They didn't know I was just a few steps away. They didn't hear the clatter of my heart hitting the floor. I didn't say anything. I smiled through dessert, hugged the kids goodnight, and pretended I didn't hear it. But that night, as I sat in bed under a crocheted blanket my mother made in 1973, I stared at the ceiling and wondered, am I really not welcome here anymore? Was all of this kindness just obligation? Or worse, was it strategy? In the days that followed, more strange things began to pile up. I'd find items missing from my pantry. Nothing big at first. A can of peaches here, a few protein bars there. I chalked it up to forgetfulness. Then it was my medication. One of my blood pressure bottles, the one I always kept in the top left drawer, was half empty. I hadn't taken that many. I looked at the bottle again. The cap wasn't screwed on. And it smelled different, not like medicine, like it had been left open for too long. I asked Kayla if the kids had been in my room. She barely looked up from her tablet. They know not to go up there. They're not stupid. I didn't like the way she said it. One morning, I decided to take a walk outside. Fresh air always helped clear my thoughts. As I passed by the side of the house, I noticed the garage door open. Inside, Adam stood with a man I didn't recognize, younger, sharp suit, clipboard in hand. I ducked behind the hedges before they saw me. "We can list it in her name first, then switch it over," the man said. Adam nodded. "She won't even notice." I felt my knees weaken. List what? Switch what over? I didn't know if they were talking about my house, the guest suite, or something else, but either way, they were making plans, and they clearly didn't intend to tell me about them. That night, I stared at the old family photo I kept beside my bed, me, Adam at age 7, Michael still alive back then, holding a fishing rod and smiling like he owned the world. I whispered into the dark, did I raise someone who could do this to me? Was I being paranoid? Was I overthinking, or was I finally seeing things clearly? The final straw came on a Wednesday morning. I had ordered a small security camera online, just one of those little indoor ones you can set on a shelf. I wasn't trying to catch anyone, I just wanted to feel safe. I set it up quietly in my living room, angled toward the front door. The next day, the camera was gone, just gone, unplugged, removed. And in its place, a small sticky note on the table. No need for this. No signature, no explanation. But I knew that's when the fear truly sank in, because this wasn't about being unwelcome anymore. This wasn't awkwardness or emotional distance. This was control. And I started to wonder, if I stayed silent, how far would they go? I never thought I'd be the kind of woman to snoop. That wasn't me. I raised my sons on honesty. I taught them the value of trust, of looking someone in the eyes and saying exactly what you meant, no secrets, no games. But what do you do when your heart is screaming that something is wrong and everyone around you insists you're just imagining it? One morning, after Adam left for work and Kayla had taken the kids to school, I stepped into their house, not through the front, but through the laundry door. They usually forgot to lock. The house was so quiet I could hear the hum of the fridge and the ticking of the old wall clock in the hall. I stood there for a second, uncertain of what I was even looking for. Then I went to Adam's office. His office door was usually locked, but today it clicked open. Stacks of papers lined the desk, insurance forms, tax documents, and something that made my blood freeze, a power of attorney form signed, dated, with my name on it. But I never signed it. At least, I didn't remember signing anything like that. My signature was there, neat and curled, just like mine, but something fell off. The shape was right, but it was too perfect, too steady. I picked up the paper and held it under the light. It wasn't a copy, it was an original. What is this? Why would he need this? My hands were trembling as I flipped through the next folder. There it was again, my signature, this time on a document titled Property Transfer Authorization to Adam. It stated I had willingly gifted the guest house property, the only asset I had left after my late husband passed, to my son for long-term estate planning. I felt like the ground opened beneath me. A sound made me freeze, a door closing. I put everything back as fast as I could and slipped out just before Kayla walked in through the front, groceries in hand. She didn't see me, but I saw her. She smiled at her phone, texted someone, laughed, and in that second, it all came together. The locked doors, the whispers, the coldness. They were planning something behind my back, something that involved my home, my money, my life. But I needed proof. That night, I couldn't sleep. My chest was tight, my thoughts louder than the crickets outside. At 2:07 a.m., I slipped out of bed and walked down to the little cabinet in my guest suite where I kept my photo albums and old papers. I dug through until I found my original will, the one my lawyer helped me write 10 years ago. I compared it to the version Adam had in his office. They were different. In my version, both Adam and my late husband's favorite charity were listed as beneficiaries. In his version, it was only Adam with full control, no charity, no conditions, just one signature, mine. And there it was again, that signature. I held the 2 pages side by side. One was shaky, real the way my hand had trembled back then when I signed after Michael died. The other was perfect, too perfect, forged. The next morning, I drove into town and paid a visit to my old friend Marlene, a retired notary who used to work with my husband. She took one look at both signatures and frowned. "This one," she said, pointing to the clean, neat one on Adam's version, "is traced." I stared at her. "What do you mean?" She pulled out a magnifying glass. "See this indentation here? It's where someone pressed too hard, probably tracing over a printed outline of your signature. It's subtle, but it's there." I felt cold all over. I thanked her, walked back to my car, and sat behind the wheel for what felt like forever. He had forged my signature. My son, my own flesh and blood, had tried to steal everything I had left. I returned home late that afternoon, pretending like everything was normal. Kayla waved at me from the porch. Adam was grilling again. "Mom, come eat with us," he called out. I forced a smile. "Maybe later, honey. I'm a little tired." But in my head, I was already planning my next move. I needed to protect myself, and fast. That night, I installed a new camera, a better one, hidden in the clock on my shelf. If they were going to take something from me, I wanted to catch it. I needed undeniable evidence, and sure enough, I got it 3 nights later. Age showed Adam unlocking the door to my suite with the emergency key. He walked in, opened my file drawer, flipped through my paperwork, and pulled out my bank statements. He took pictures of them, every single page. Then he walked out like it was the most normal thing in the world. The betrayal hit me in waves. First confusion, wondering how the boy I raised could do this. Then grief for the relationship I thought we had. And finally, rage, not fiery, screaming rage, but a cold, steady kind of anger, the kind that makes you act. I printed the photos and saved the video files to 3 USB sticks. I mailed one to Marlene, another to my lawyer. Then I made a decision. If Adam thought I was old and weak, if he thought I wouldn't fight back, he was about to learn something he should have known all along. You don't mess with a mother who's already lost everything. That weekend, I invited Adam and Kayla over for lunch. I made his favorite roast chicken, just like I used to when he was a kid. He smiled as he ate, completely unaware of what was coming. Halfway through dessert, I pulled out the manila folder and slid it across the table. "What's this?" he asked. "Proof," I said calmly, "of everything." His smile faded. Kayla looked confused. Adam flipped through the pages, and the color drained from his face. "I don't understand," he stammered. "Oh, I think you do," I replied. "I was just trying to help," he blurted, "to organize things for you." "By forging my will," I said, my voice calm, "by sneaking into my room and photographing my bank statements." Silence. I stood up. "You've made your choices. Now I'm making mine." That night, I rewrote my will. I removed Adam from everything, every account, every title, every clause. Instead, I left it all to an organization that helps elderly women escape abusive family situations, and to one person who had always shown me kindness without condition, my part-time housekeeper, Rosa, the only one who ever asked me how I was really doing. I wasn't angry anymore. I was free. After Adam and Kayla left that afternoon, I stood by the kitchen sink for a long time, staring out at the garden. My hands were still sticky with peach cobbler, and the house smelled like rosemary and lemon, cozy, familiar scents. But inside, I felt hollow. I had imagined this moment 1,000 ways, yelling, tears, maybe even throwing a plate or two. But when it actually happened, when the truth finally sat in front of me in black and white, I didn't feel rage. I felt numb. That night, I couldn't sleep again, not because I was scared. The fear had passed. Not because I was angry. That had cooled too. No, I couldn't sleep because something inside me had shifted, something permanent, something I couldn't unfeel or unknow. It wasn't just about the house or the money or even the documents. It was the look on my son's face when I confronted him, the lack of remorse, the slight annoyance as if I had interrupted something. He didn't say, "I'm sorry." He didn't cry. He didn't ask what he could do to fix it. He just looked caught, like a boy who'd broken a vase, and hoped no one would notice. I sat in my little guest room, wrapped in my shawl, and opened my laptop. It was time to protect myself thoroughly, properly, and without emotion. I began by scanning every document I had in the house: my will, insurance papers, medical directives, property titles. I uploaded them all to a secure folder online and gave access to my lawyer and my old friend Marlene, the only two people I still trusted completely. Then I changed my passwords, not just for my email, but for my bank accounts, my online storage, and even my smart thermostat. Because if Adam was willing to fake documents, who knows what else he'd try? Over the next few days, I started reviewing my surveillance camera footage every night. Not obsessively, just enough to keep track of who came and went. Most of it was mundane: birds on the porch, delivery men dropping packages. But on the third night, I saw something that stopped me cold: Kayla in my room at 10:42 p.m. She stood at my nightstand and opened the drawer. Then she pulled out a small notebook, the one I used to jot down passwords and reminders. She flipped through it, took a picture with her phone, and placed it back carefully, like she hadn't touched a thing. I leaned back in my chair, stunned. They weren't just trying to take from me. They were trying to take everything: control, identity, access. I sat in silence and whispered to myself, they never planned to stop. The next morning, I called Rosa. She was due to clean next week, but I asked her to come early, and not just for cleaning. When she arrived, I brewed a pot of her favorite coffee, the hazelnut one she always loved, and invited her to sit with me. "Rosa," I said, "I need your help, but more than that, I need your eyes and your ears." I showed her the documents, the footage, the forged signatures. Her eyes welled with tears. "I always thought something was off," she said softly. "They never looked you in the eyes when I was around. They treated you like a burden." I nodded. "I don't want to be bitter, but I do need to be smart." Together, we started checking the rest of the house. Rosa noticed things I hadn't: scratches on the doorknob to the attic, a tiny dent in the safe under my bed, even a recently moved floorboard near the vent. "They've been all over," she whispered, "looking for whatever they can." That afternoon, I made an appointment with a lawyer, not the one who helped me with my old will, but a new one, a woman named Evelyn who specialized in elder protection and estate fraud. When I walked into her office, I didn't feel like a victim anymore. I felt like a woman with a plan. I handed her the folder I had compiled: timestamps, footage, signature samples, sworn statements from Marlene and Rosa. Evelyn looked through it silently, then met my eyes. "Miss Bennett," she said, "this is not only evidence of fraud, it's a prosecutable case. If you want to press charges, you can." I paused. Do I? I thought about that. Did I want to take my own son to court? Did I want the scandal, the gossip, or was the best? Punishment is simply removing him from my life entirely. "I want protection," I said. "Finally, legal, emotional, physical. I want to feel safe, and I want to ensure he never tries this again with me or anyone else." Evelyn nodded. "We can do that." I updated my will officially and publicly. I gave Rosa power of attorney, the real kind. I set up notifications on my accounts for any login attempts, and I filed a police report, not to arrest Adam, but to create a legal record just in case. The final step: I moved out of the guest house, not far, just across town to a small condo near the water. It had less space, but it had peace, and peace was priceless. Sometimes I still look at old photos of Adam when he was a boy, his gap-toothed grin, his Little League medals, the Mother's Day card he made out of construction paper and glitter. I miss that boy, but that boy is gone, and what's left is a man who made a choice, so I made mine. It happened on a Sunday. The sky was bruised with gray clouds, and the air smelled like rain. I had invited Adam and Kayla over under the pretense of family time, a warm lunch, some lemon tea, a conversation. That's what I told them. They arrived fashionably late as usual. Kayla wore that tight-lipped smile that never quite touched her eyes. Adam kissed my cheek, his lips barely brushing my skin. "Hey, Mom," I smiled back. "Come in, let's talk." We didn't sit at the dining table. I led them to the living room where the coffee table was already set, not with food, but with neatly stacked folders, my laptop, and a small box. Kayla looked at the setup and gave Adam a sideways glance. What's all this?" I didn't answer right away. I sat down and gestured for them to do the same. When they were seated, I opened the laptop and pressed play. There, in sharp clarity, played the footage of Kayla in my room. She opened my drawer, she took my notebook, she photographed every page. The room fell silent except for the soft hum of the ceiling fan. Kayla stiffened. "That's not what it looks like." Adam leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "Why were you recording us?" I ignored the deflection. Next, I slid a manila folder across the table. Inside were screenshots of my will, both versions, one legitimate and signed, the other altered. I had even marked the digital fingerprints showing who modified the document and when. "I don't understand," Adam said, his voice faltering. "You don't need to understand," I replied. "You already knew. You were counting on me being too trusting to ever check." Kayla's voice cracked. "We were just trying to help. You've been so forgetful lately." "No," I cut in sharply. "Don't twist this. You weren't helping. You were preparing, planning. You were hoping I wouldn't notice until it was too late." Adam stood, pacing. His hands trembled slightly. "You always think the worst of me. Ever since Dad died, it's like nothing I do is good enough." My voice stayed calm. "This isn't about being good enough. This is about betrayal, theft, manipulation." He froze. I picked up the small box on the table and opened it. Inside I have the original documents, notarized statements from my lawyer, and a USB drive with all the surveillance footage backed up in triplicate. "You changed my will, accessed my accounts, and tried to take control of my life," I said, holding his gaze. "But I've taken it all back." "You can't be serious," Adam said, his voice almost a whisper. "Oh, I'm very serious." The moment shifted. I wasn't the frail mother who needed their help. I was a woman who had seen the cracks in her foundation and rebuilt it stronger. I leaned forward, my voice steady. "As of now, you are no longer named in my will. You will receive nothing from my estate, and if you or Kayla attempt to contact me, harass me, or interfere with my affairs again, my lawyer is prepared to file charges." Kayla's face turned pale. "You're throwing away your own son." "No," I said. "He threw me away the moment he said, 'I don't owe you anything.' He made his choice." Adam's lips parted for a moment. Just a flicker. I saw the boy I used to know, the one who scraped his knees playing tag and cried when I read bedtime stories. But that boy was gone, and this man in front of me, who stood by while his wife invaded my privacy and falsified my documents, didn't deserve my love, my trust, or my forgiveness. "I can't believe this," Adam said, his voice breaking. "I didn't want to believe it either," I replied, "but belief has nothing to do with it anymore. This is truth, and truth doesn't need your permission." I stood, finally, my hands no longer trembling. "Please leave." They hesitated. Now Adam opened his mouth, then closed it. Kayla grabbed her purse, her eyes red but dry. They left without another word. I stood at the window, watching them walk down the path like strangers in the rain, and I didn't cry, not this time. I made myself a cup of tea and sat in silence for a while. The confrontation had ended, but the war for my peace had already been won because I had chosen myself, not out of spite, not out of anger, but out of love, the kind you give yourself when no one else will. The day after the confrontation, the house felt heavy, like the walls still held the echoes of betrayal. I stood in the kitchen with a cup of lukewarm tea, staring at the morning light spilling through the window. For a while, I did nothing, just breathed, just existed. Then I took out a notebook, not the one Kayla had stolen, but a fresh one with clean pages, no lies, no edits. I wrote 3 things. I deserve peace. I will not live in fear. I am not powerless. And with that, I made my list. The first step was leaving. That very week, I called a friend from church, Maria. She was a retired realtor who had helped me and James buy our home decades ago. She listened, then said, "Come stay with me. We'll find you a new place, one that's all yours, no shadows, no strings." I packed slowly. I didn't rush it. I let myself cry over each photo, each folded sweater, each piece of the life I thought I was building with my son. Some items went in boxes, others I let go of entirely. Leaving wasn't just about space, it was about soul. Help! I found a small but beautiful bungalow not far from the beach. White shutters, a rose bush by the door, and a porch swing I didn't even know I wanted until I sat on it and felt the ocean breeze kiss my face. Signing the lease felt like taking back my name. No one had access to this place but me and the lawyer I now trusted. The locks were new, the cameras mine, the accounts mine. I wasn't hiding. I was protecting what was mine to begin with, my future. The second step was legal. My lawyer filed an official notice revoking any prior will that could have been tampered with. He submitted a statement outlining what had happened and ensured my son and Kayla were legally removed from any financial rights tied to me or my estate. He also filed a cease and desist order just in case. "I can pursue charges if you want," he said gently. I shook my head. "Not yet. I don't want revenge. I just want freedom." He nodded, respecting the quiet strength in my choice. Then came the emotional part, the release. For weeks, I took long walks by the beach barefoot when I could, just to feel grounded. I watched birds dive into the ocean and marveled at how nature could be so chaotic and so peaceful at once. Some days I sobbed on that porch swing. Other days I laughed, really laughed, at nothing in particular, at the absurdity of life, at the strange relief that comes when the worst has happened and you realize you're still standing. I found comfort in little things, the sound of wind chimes, the smell of jasmine, the way my dog, an old rescue named Milo, leaned against my leg like he knew I needed, reminding I wasn't alone. One evening, as I was organizing boxes in my new living room, I found an old envelope. Inside was a letter James had written me on our 30th anniversary. In it, he said, "If life ever gets loud, go where your peace lives. You don't owe anyone your sanity, not even the ones you love." I held that letter to my chest and whispered, "Thank you." He had seen what I hadn't. I started journaling more, and eventually, I started smiling at my own reflections in windows and mirrors. The woman looking back at me wasn't just a mother or a widow. She was someone who had survived betrayal and chosen not to become bitter. She had escaped a trap and found something more precious than comfort, clarity. I did something unexpected next. I signed up for a watercolor class at the community center. I hadn't painted in over 20 years. On my first day, I told the instructor, "I'm not very good." She smiled and said, "Good. That means you're free to create without fear." It hit me like a wave. For the first time in years, I wasn't painting to impress. I wasn't living to please. I was just being, and that to me was the greatest victory of all. The first thing I did when I fully moved into my new home was open every window. I let the Florida breeze rush in, sweeping through the rooms like a blessing. The salt in the air danced with the scent of the lemon sage candle I had burning by the window. It was quiet, not heavy, suspicious silence. I used to live in, but a soft, living quiet, like the house was finally breathing with me, not against me. I stood barefoot on the terracotta tiles of the kitchen and whispered to no one in particular, "This is mine." And for the first time in years, I meant it. The house was small, but it was perfect. One bedroom, a little reading nook under the stairs, and a garden I tended to every morning with muddy hands and a content heart. The walls were painted soft pastels, coral in the kitchen, sky blue in the bedroom. Colors I never had the courage to pick before because someone else always had an opinion. Now I painted them myself. I picked out thrifted furniture and hand-sewn throw pillows. Nothing matched, nothing needed to. I drank my morning coffee on the porch swing, wrapped in a woven shawl James had once given me, and listened to the birds argue in the trees like noisy neighbors. Sometimes I wrote in my journal, sometimes I just rocked gently and watched the sunrise. That porch became my sanctuary, the place where I remembered who I was. I created rituals that made me feel whole again. Every Friday, I bought fresh flowers from the local market, sunflowers, tulips, whatever caught my eye. Every Sunday, I called a different friend, old or new, and simply listened. No gossip, no drama, just connection. I started cooking for joy again, not obligation, warm cornbread, rosemary chicken, peach cobbler that filled the entire house with the smell of home. Evenings were slow. I'd light a candle, turn on jazz or soft classical, and sit cross-legged on the couch with my dog curled beside me, reading books I never had time for when I was too busy trying to fix people who didn't want to be fixed. There were still echoes of pain. Yes, sometimes I'd see a young man walking with his mother and feel a sting in my chest. Sometimes I wondered if Adam ever regretted what he did or if he missed me. But that pain didn't own me anymore. It was a scar, not an open wound, and like all scars, it reminded me of what I survived, not what I lost. One afternoon, I was painting in the garden when Maria stopped by. She stood at the gate, watching me brush watercolor onto paper. "You look 10 years younger," she said with a grin. I laughed. It's the freedom. It's anti-aging. We sat together on the garden bench and sipped hibiscus tea. She asked if I ever thought about moving closer to my son again. I paused, then said gently, "Forgiveness, maybe, but trust that has to be earned." She nodded, and that was the end of it. No judgment, no pressure, just two women in a sun-drenched garden honoring life's quiet second chances. Over time, I started volunteering at the community library every Thursday. I read to children during story hour. They called me Miss Ellie. I taught them how to make paper butterflies and told them stories about wild grandmas and brave raccoons. One little girl named Clara hugged me every week and said, "You smell like cake." That became my favorite compliment. One day, the library asked if I wanted to host a memoir writing workshop for seniors. At first, I laughed. Who would want to hear my story? Then I remembered people like you are hearing it right now, so I said yes. The first session had 3 women and one quiet man who wrote about losing his wife and learning to make spaghetti for the first time. I listened to every word because stories, real stories, are what stitch broken people back together. Months passed, seasons shifted. The rose bush by my front door bloomed wildly in the spring, as if the roots knew they were finally safe. Birds nested under my eaves. Neighbors stopped by with tomatoes, fresh bread, and sometimes just company. I didn't just rebuild a life. I claimed it piece by piece, page by page, not as someone's mother, not as someone's widow, not as a victim, but as Ellie, just Ellie. A woman who survived betrayal, planted herself in sunlight, and grew. And now, if you're still listening, if you've walked this path with me from pain to power, let me leave you with this. You are allowed to start over. You are allowed to walk away from people who call you family, but treat you like a burden. You are allowed to bloom wildly, quietly, and without apology. You are not too old, it is not too late, and you are not alone. Sometimes the people who say they love us the most are the ones who try to control us in the darkest ways. They hide secrets behind smiles, rewrite our stories, and try to cage us in guilt and silence. But freedom, real freedom, is not just a word. It's a breath, it's a choice, it's reclaiming your life piece by piece, moment by moment, even when it feels impossible. My journey wasn't easy. It was filled with pain, tears, and moments when I doubted myself. But in those moments, I learned something powerful. I am not defined by betrayal. I am not broken by deceit. I am whole because I chose to be. Choosing peace over chaos, choosing myself over the expectations of others, that's the greatest victory anyone can have. And if there's one thing I want you to remember, it's this. No matter what storms you face, no matter how dark the path feels, you have the power to walk out of the shadows and into your own light because your story isn't over. It's just beginning. Now, I want to hear from you. If you discovered someone watching your every move, what would you do? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I read everyone. And if this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe. It helps me bring more real, raw stories like this one to life, stories that remind us we're never truly alone. Thank you for being here and for being part of this journey.